Apocalyptic imagination is the great stepchild of Western culture, especially since the age of reason colonized our minds and hearts. Apocalyptic literature's wild, visionary, almost shamanistic symbolism is forever being consigned to the academic or the fundamentalist or the loony bin fringes by the dominant culture. I think this is because, as a tradition of resistance, apocalyptic is at once too pessimistic about the current status quo and at the same time too hopeful about redemption coming from beyond history as controlled by empire. Yet apocalyptic motifs keep popping up in popular culture, not least in the movies. There is, of course, no biblical tradition more widely and profoundly misunderstood and misappropriated than apocalyptic. It's sort of like a strong therapeutic drug. It needs to be handled wisely because what can heal can also kill if abused. For all these difficulties, however, I believe that apocalyptic holds an important key to discerning any given historical moment, not least our own. And that's why I salute the KAIROS movement in Canada for not being afraid to wrestle with the controversial power of apocalyptic imagination. God knows the times we are in demand nothing less. Now, apocalyptic is, in the popular mind, often associated with the cataclysmic destruction of the world. And that's unfortunate. It's partly true. Apocalyptic thinking does long for the end of the world as we know it, that is, the end of oppression and particularly the demise of the imperial state. In fact, apocalyptic literature arose specifically from the context of ancient empire, beginning probably during the era of Persian and then through the era of Hellenistic domination of the Mediterranean world. Now, I think, as may have been said yesterday, I don't know, I just got in last night, but the Greek word apocalypsis means an unmasking or an unveiling. It has to do with an ability to see, with a kind of vision that is able to see through the dominant stories of empire. Empire with its not-so-useful fictions of entitlement and sovereignty, its militaristic triumphalism, its seductive delusions of grandeur, its severe orthodoxies of law and order. Apocalyptic attempts to peer through all of that, to peer through what, if you remember, some of you say under 45, if you remember the film The Matrix, Morpheus says to Neo, it's the world that has been pulled over your eyes. Apocalyptic seeks to see through that, through the propaganda of empire that masks the truth, distorts what it means to be human, and hijacks history. Apocalyptic endeavors to pierce through this veil to see reality from the standpoint of redemption. And it does this in two ways. By stripping away layers of denial that keep us distracted in order to expose the realities of suffering and injustice. In other words, to see the world as it really is from the perspective of the poor and the marginalized. And secondly, by transfusing our dulled and dumbed down imaginations with visions of the world as it really could be and should be from the perspective of divine love and justice. We might call that apocalyptic double vision. To see the truth of the world enslaved and to envision the world liberated. To illustrate this with a New Testament text that is not usually considered apocalyptic, I want to just briefly look at the example of Ephesians 3. There, Paul the apostle is portrayed as a prisoner of empire because of his fidelity to the vision of Christ, which demands that every form of racial and ethnic apartheid be overturned. Now, Paul is a Jew who is suffering imprisonment because of a Gentile majority. And he is appealing to his race and class adversaries, not unlike, to use a more contemporary analogy, Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham City Jail, in which the black prophet challenges the white segregationist majority which has him locked up. But Paul's vision of beloved community is not obvious to those socially formed in the propaganda of the Roman Empire, so the apostle calls his gospel a mystery. It's not obvious to the dominant culture, but it has been revealed to him. Notice the word is apocalypsin. There's the apocalyptic tone. Paul unmasks the alleged justice of Rome by sitting in jail as a resistor. But he also insists on the mysterious possibility of social transformation in Christ. The same approach was taken around the same period at the end of the first century during the persecution of the church under Emperor Domitian by another political prisoner, namely John of Patmos, who authors a much more elaborate apocalyptic appeal in the book of Revelation. Well, in Ephesians 3, Paul goes on to talk about the fact that the realities of injustice are being denied by the dominant culture, which Paul's presence in jail is exposing. On the other hand, the possibilities of a different way of being are being glimpsed. In the case of Ephesians, overcoming institutionalized enmity and discrimination through a new form of social solidarity. Paul, no less than 3 times in this passage, calls this new way of being a mystery. It's not obvious. And he goes on to say that the vocation of the church is to proclaim this Sophia wisdom to the highest rulers and authorities, principalities and powers. This is typical apocalyptic vocabulary. Many of you know the work of Walter Wink, who's helped us see that this language represents the spirit that stands behind social and political structures. In other words, Paul is calling the church to evangelize the powers, something that our timid denominations have long forgotten, but which apocalyptic faith puts at the very center of discipleship. Apocalyptic, then, is surprisingly militant and in its advocacy for radical change. As one New Testament scholar put it 30 years ago, no one can pick up this cord that is plugged into the gospel of expectation without becoming shocked into a quarrel with themselves and their own people. We see this quarrel in one 20th century intellectual tradition that did take apocalyptic seriously, namely critical theory, notably that mystical Jewish Marxist philosopher Walter Benjamin. Consider one of Benjamin's most riveting images from his 9th thesis on the philosophy of history. A painting by Paul Klee named Angelus Novus shows an angel looking as though he is about to move away from something he is fixedly contemplating. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how one might picture the angel of history. His face is turned toward the past. Where we perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, make whole that which has been smashed, but a storm is blowing from paradise. It has gotten caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm, says Benjamin, is what we call progress. Ouch.